This is a 2020 Mazda CX-30. It slots in between the tiny CX-3 and the still somewhat small, but still mid-size CUV CX-5. And Mazda has us out here in the middle of nowhere in California to see what this thing's all about. So, let's take a look. So the CX-30 is a pretty good looking little beast here. It's definitely more CX-5 than it is CX-3, and that's definitely a good thing, because to my eyes, and to the eyes of many others, the CX-3 is basically a lifted up Mazda 3 with body cladding on it that's somehow less practical. This guy, on the other hand, is definitely a 95% sized Mazda CX-5, though there are some notable styling differences inside and out. Now, starting at the front here, very minimalist in nature, especially compared to CX-5. Now, Mazda says this is called beauty by subtraction. Basically, they've taken away any unnecessary elements. So basically, all you have in the front here are headlights, a grille, and some very thin LED fog lights down here. Otherwise, everything's kind of pared back and nice. It looks very sleek and futuristic. Now in profile, I also think the CX-30 is a pretty good looking ride, though the full body cladding that runs along the entire length of the vehicle is very divisive. I'm personally not a fan of this look, though Mazda says by doing this, they lift the side profile and make it look very agile, though to me it kind of looks like it's on stilts. And it has a kind of undesirable effect of making the wheels, which on this test car, 18 inches, look smaller than they actually are, because the whole thing kind of raises upward. Now at the rear of the CX-30, surprise, surprise, it is a blend of CX-3 and CX-5 again. Though unlike the ultra tiny CX-3, Mazda's gone to great lengths to really open up the trunk of CX-30. So it's both wider and opens lower down to give you more usable opening space when you do open the trunk. Now, Mazda, being a Japanese brand, of course, has a lot of Japanese expressions to explain why they do what they do. For example, the exterior styling is called Kodo. The interior styling is something new for the brand. It's called Ma. It's a Japanese expression that talks about the openness and the closedness of interior spaces. Now, basically, what that means in practice is that they designed the CX-30's cabin to feel both airy and spacious, but at the same time having the sensation of wrapping around the driver. Now, look at the door cards, for example. They have this great curvature in them that actually closes into the dashboard and kind of closes into you. Now, in addition to the cockpit-like feel Mazda's going after, they're also going after the use of higher quality materials than a lot of the competitive set. Now, this particular car has the white leather seats with the brown leather dash. Now, it's a very dark, rich brown that actually does contrast nicely with all the black in this car, especially in the daylight. It's a really nice pairing. Additionally, Mazda's also offered some really cool color combos, like you can get CX-30 with a blue interior. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but this combo right here, the white and brown leather with the black, it looks really nice and very classy, very upscale. Now, while I like the quality of the materials in the cabin of CX-30 and I'm pretty impressed with it, especially given the price point, things are a little bit tricky back here in the rear seats. You see, I'm 6'1" on a good day, and even I struggle to find enough headroom back here. And unfortunately, the story isn't actually that much better in the front seats either. Now, it seems like if you were going to buy a CX-30, if you're much taller than about 6'2", you're not going to be very comfortable in this car. And there's a few reasons for that discomfort, but most of it actually comes from these seats. Now, Mazda went on to great lengths about how ergonomically designed these seats are and how they help your posture and are good for your spine and all that. And that may be true, but the fact of the matter is that even in the lowest setting, as the seat is now, there's a several inch gap between the bottom of the seat and the floor, and that does ultimately affect your headroom, because I have the seat at the lowest position, and while my head may just clear the headliner, I do still feel like I'm sitting way too high in this vehicle. So, like the CX-5, Mazda's gone to great lengths to make the CX-30 quite a luxurious cabin. Now, there are two main things that really stand out to me. Let me show you. The first is how quiet it is. There's a lot of insulation in this cabin that makes for a very quiet place, whether you're stationary or when you're cruising down the road. It's a very quiet cabin. Now, the second thing I really like is the infotainment screen, and let me show you why. This is Mazda's infotainment screen. It's very short and very wide. It's also very deep inset into the dash, and that's because it's not a touchscreen. Instead, Mazda's realized the best way to have an infotainment screen in a car is to use push button dials. So these dials down here control your infotainment screen, and that is excellent because it basically minimizes the amount of time you spend looking away from where you're driving. Additionally, this car has heads-up display, which again, it's all about keeping your eyes on the road, because if your car has a touchscreen, usually they're down here, they are a massive inconvenience towards driving because you have to look away from the road and focus on what you're touching. Now, the screen also has something I really like. It's very minimalist in nature. Now, Mazda cited something called Miller's Law, which basically says that human beings can only really focus or memorize about 7 things plus or minus 2 things at any given point. So if you have all these things on the screen, there's just too much things going on. There's too much decision fatigue. So on this screen, on the CX-30, there's only 5 things at any given point on the screen, which makes it very easy to quickly look at what you need to do and do it. So I've been driving the CX-30 all day, and unfortunately, like every car, there are good and bad elements to this. Now, Mazda is one of those brands that is fanatical about those small driving details that only the most connected drivers are going to notice. And sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's a bad thing. And the CX-30, again, it's a mixed bag. Now, Mazda went on at great lengths about their G vectoring control plus, and how when the car is over 0.4 G in braking or acceleration or cornering, it makes these changes to make it more agile and more dynamic, or whatever buzzword they want to use now. But unfortunately, it doesn't really feel like anything. Now, that's not really a bad thing, but when you buy into the hype, I'm sure it's slightly disappointing. Now, as far as dynamics are concerned, there are a lot of good things happening here. This car has one of the best brake pedal feels I've ever experienced in a new vehicle. That's also something Mazda went on great lengths about. They basically want to try and minimize the sensation of your head bobbing under hard braking. So they've done a lot of tweaking in suspension to really kind of minimize the amount of roll you get, forward roll, when you brake hard. It minimizes that brake dive sensation. And in addition to minimizing brake dive for a high-riding, compact, subcompact CUV, the brake pedal feel itself through the pedal is actually fabulous. It's really firm and just a really short stroke, has tons of feedback through it, which is kind of strange for an SUV, but it's a really nice surprise. Similarly, this car has excellent steering. I shouldn't call it a car, it's a CUV, a subcompact CUV at that, though it's basically a car in nature as a result of that. Yes, the steering is excellent in this thing. It's an electric power steering unit, but it does have a good amount of feedback through the wheel. Perhaps it is the G vectoring control plus working in the background after all, because it does have the sensation of having a very fluid, smooth steering, especially when the road gets curvy. Now, as far as performance is concerned, the CX-30 is not going to blow your face off with its acceleration, and that's a-okay. After all, this thing has a base price of $21,000, and in the subcompact CUV segment, I feel that's redundant, subcompact compact utility vehicle. In any case, in the subcompact compact utility vehicle segment, this has the most power in its class. It has the same 2.5-liter naturally aspirated inline-four cylinder SkyActiv-G engine that you can find in the base Mazda CX-5, the one step above this. It produces 186 horsepower and 186 pound-feet of torque. It's paired exclusively to a 6-speed automatic transmission, and it is truly sufficient for day-to-day use. Now, like all subcompact CUVs, that's going to drive me nuts forever. The CX-30 is front-wheel drive as standard, with all-wheel drive being an available extra. Mazda calls it i-Activ all-wheel drive, and basically it's a system that has the majority of the power going to the front wheels, but it can obviously delegate torque to the rear wheels as needed. And the cool thing is it also works together with that G vectoring control plus to really optimize the distribution of power to each individual wheel. So in the instance of a slippery road condition, if you hit a little bit of snow or some rain, it's really going to optimize the amount of traction this vehicle does have and kind of pull you through the corners. Now, no one on earth is going to be testing limit handling in their CX-30. though it's pretty adept in the corners. The nice thing I can say on the other hand, however, is that this thing rides very well, especially on these optional 18-inch wheels. While base model CX-30s have 16s, this test car has the 18s, and despite that, it rides very nicely indeed. Like all car manufacturers these days, Mazda is truly an international brand, and to that end, the majority of the CX-30 design comes from Mazda's team in Frankfurt, Germany. According to Mazda, the lead designer of CX-30 was a young guy who just started a family, and so he envisioned what sort of vehicle would be helpful for him and his young family. So you can imagine, this is made for people that have 2 kids, or in the case of the United States, they have 2.5 kids, right? That's the new average now. And I think you could get 2 kids in the back seat of this thing, because like I said before, people who are over 6 foot tall are not going to be comfortable in the back for long stretches, but if you have young kids, they should be totally fine back there. And I did see anchors for child seats as well if your kids are really young. If you're buying a new car and you do care about your kids, which you probably do, this car has a lot of standard safety equipment. In addition to having 8 airbags as standard, it has things, oh man, all the acronyms. So there is blind spot monitoring, blind spot warning, lane keep assist, lane keep warning, and rear cross traffic alert, among others. Now, if you can keep all those straight, you're better off than me, but all you really need to know is that the systems do work, though Mazda themselves, they kind of tune them to be more passive in nature. So if you do wander out of your lane, the CX-30 will offer minimal corrections to the steering wheel, but it's not going to jerk you back in place like some other cars do. It's definitely more of a passive system. And Mazda says that's because they design cars for the drivers, for people who pay attention behind the wheel. Whether or not you find value in that is up to you. Now, something else that's very subjective is definitely the seats in this vehicle. Now, again, Mazda went on to these great lengths about the ergonomics of these seats and how it's good for your hips and good for your spine and it makes you a better human being, gives you superpowers, etc., etc. Now, I find these seats very comfortable, but my co-driver for the day, a fellow journalist, Bradley Brownell, he does not find them comfortable. And I get it, seats are a very subjective thing. So it's definitely something you want to try because these are quite a different experience from many other cars on the road. They're quite firm and they have this sort of upright posture in the lower lumbar area that kind of, again, it gives you great posture while you're driving, but it can feel a bit unnatural to some. Now, you may be wondering, why is this thing called CX-30? Mazda already has a CX-3 and a CX-5. Why is it not called the CX-4? Well, Mazda sells a CX-4, but it's a Chinese-only exclusive vehicle. Additionally, Mazda's using it as a sort of new naming convention. It gives them a chance to kind of try out new things. So while this CX-30 is a production vehicle, you can go out to your local Mazda dealership and buy one now, Mazda's also using the 30 name to kind of test out and try new things. So the brand has just debuted its first ever full EV vehicle, the MX-30 in Japan. And while I am a fan of this 4-cylinder powertrain, I have to wonder, why does Mazda not offer any sort of hybridized electric powertrains in the United States yet? That seems like something they could bring to market and do really well on. Of course, I can't complain because the fuel economy figures in the CX-30 are pretty respectable. This thing is rated at 25 mpg on the city and 33 mpg on the freeway for front-wheel drive models and 24 and 31 respectively for all-wheel drive models. Though, I suspect with a hybrid option, you can easily get that to over 30 mpg in the city, and that'd be really cool. If you're looking at a CX-30, what should you compare it against? Well, like I mentioned before, the base MSRP is $21,900 and fully loaded is $29 grand. So for that money, for this size, what you're comparing it against is the Honda HR-V, the Toyota CHR, the Nissan Rogue Sport, and the Kia Soul, among others. Though, curiously, Mazda's making this upmarket push, so the cars they benchmarked against the CX-30 were actually, in terms of NVH and the ride and all of that, was actually the BMW X1 and X2 and the Audi Q3, along with the Lexus UX200. Now, I have to admit, color me surprised. I came into this expecting to think that the CX-5 would just blow this thing out of the water, because for me, the CX-5 was one of my great surprises that I drove in the year 2018. And this for 2020, you know, it's so close in price and so close on paper that I thought, you know, just pay the premium and buy the CX-5 and call it a day. And while it's true, I do still think the CX-5 does have the superior cabin, especially when you get the top of the line trims as far as luxury appointments. For day-to-day use, I think this does the job for most people. It's a bit sportier than CX-5, it's a bit fresher to look at on the outside, it feels a bit newer on the inside, and it has enough of the luxury and the tech features of CX-5 that I'm not wanting for anything, I'm not missing anything. And for me, I think that makes this thing a total knockout. I mean, fully loaded 29 grand, it has more power than anything in its class, more standard features, it looks really sharp, it drives quite nicely, it's comfortable, it's quiet. I mean, just go test drive one. I'm really stoked on this thing. Alright everyone, thank you very much for watching. That is the 2020 Mazda CX-30. That's all I got for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. Like I said, please subscribe if you've not already. That definitely helps me out in attending more of these events in the future. And please stay tuned because I have a lot of really cool cars in the pipeline I think you guys are really going to enjoy. Alright, that's all I got. See you guys later. Bye.